Not the what? Good morning.
Good morning. Early morning.
Good morning. I want to tell a story, a couple of stories, and this is one of those things. This subject and the stories I can tell serve allegorically. These are like parables. It's bigger than what I want to talk about, which is snakes. Okay, bear with me because this is fascinating. It's spring, early summer, and this is the time when nature awakens and burgeons, right? So we've got all the birds. We literally sit here and watch the rabbits and the nesting birds and the baby birds and the hawks taking the birds, and nature playing out its theater, right? And snakes are a part of that, and they're a very important part of it. They control rodent population and things like that, and it truly is a balance. So it is important, but it's also a teachable thing, and that is the hysteria about snakes. So just open your mind to what I'm about to say, and don't judge and don't rush to conclusions, but just hear what I'm saying. We're all different and we're all taught differently. You might say we're brainwashed from birth, one way or another. We're all brainwashed. We're always certain about things that there really isn't that much certainty about.
Yeah, we all have our little programs. That
We're running programs. We're believing things, and we believe things. But I've always been a seeker of just honesty and trying to pierce through the veil and see the real truth. Is there real truth? I don't know. Beyond what we're just taught and programmed and what's pushed into our little heads from birth. Okay, you look at people that religion you don't like. Yeah, I don't like their religion. Their religion is wrong. That's the wrong God. Or, well, why is that? And why do they believe that? They believe that because when they woke up, when they were babies, they came out of the womb and they went to the temple and they were taught that religion, and they were taught to believe that God, that's that specific brand, and they don't believe anything else. They can't imagine that there is a separate, another reality. They believe that thing that they were taught, just as you do, just as I don't believe necessarily what you believe. I have tried to liberate myself from beliefs that are pushed into people. If it's something that is taught, if it is a belief that is taught, and if you didn't get it, really think about it with using intellectual honesty. Just really be honest. Okay, this is not a religious discussion or debate, but things that are taught. Okay, so you as a child may have watched your father running around the hedges with a shovel in absolute panic with that look in his eye. Oh, there's a little bunny rabbit. Kill it, kill it. No, see, that's hysteria. Oh. It'll spread disease. I could get hysterical. Huh? Part of the theater. There's vermin there. He's gonna kill us all with rabbit disease. Go get my gun. So you watched your father running around frantically, like the world depended upon him as its savior to kill a garter snake or a glass lizard or something that looked like a snake. Anything that is a snake. Yeah. Why? Why that hysteria? Because he saw his daddy do it, maybe, or his neighbor if he didn't have a daddy. He was taught. He was conditioned. I don't really believe in the theory of natural fear of serpents, of snakes. I believe it is taught. I believe it is conditioned into us. You might have a different belief, but let's just go further with this. If your daddy did that and you respected your daddy or your mother or your aunt, whoever was out in the garden, you're likely gonna share that belief because it's familial, it's tradition, it's your belief. So when I was a child, my father, who I always call my ne'er-do-well father, he was an irresponsible man, but he was a stunt man, and he happened to have a collection of reptiles. So I came into the world witnessing this. My father handled alligators professionally for Warner Brothers. This was a different world, a different lifetime. We went into another world after that. He left, but anyway, when I was a child, I was immersed in that culture. My father worked for a man named Arthur Jones, who was famous in the 50s through the 70s as a reptile farm owner, and he traded in that industry. He brought in elephants from Africa into Florida, and he's a very famous character. But my father worked directly for him as a youngster, and so he worked on snake farms. So I was conditioned that way. We had alligators in our garage in Los Angeles Valley, and people were not supposed to know this because he was renting them for a time to these movie production companies. Anyway, so I didn't develop the fear of snakes and reptiles. I developed a fascination for them. So I believe, in a sense, to be myself somewhat of a custodian and maybe educate other people as to another possible reality and way of seeing these things. So some of you are just going to, off the cuff, just say, no, this is all crazy. You're full of it. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't care about your crazy father. These things need to be killed. Well, they don't. Quite possibly, they just don't. So there comes along with this conditioning a hell of a lot of resistance to education, and that's what bothers me, and that's why this is teachable, and this is important to understand. Not just because I need to convince you not to go kill snakes. That's not it. This is bigger than that. This is a microcosm that I'm trying to open up into the larger picture and say, what about if it's this way with snakes, what is it with other things that I believe? Okay, so I'm saying, yeah, you don't need to go out and kill snakes, and maybe educate yourself a little bit about it. And I'm not trying to be harsh and judgmental. You do basically, you know, and I know that you are going to do what you want to do on your own private property, right? Definitely don't go out into the wild seeking these creatures out and killing them. That's just wrong. I think we can all agree on that. But if you firmly believe that copperhead is going to kill your baby and your wife and whatever, you do what you need to do. I wash my hands. So, but in reality, so I awoke this morning and I was just perusing comments, and somebody saw me holding a copperhead. I was just exhibiting it and showing its fangs. It was a living copperhead that I found on my property, and I relocated it. And yes, I understand the law of unintended consequences, but so I do so with forethought and caution. I don't put it in my neighbor's yard or next to a neighborhood or a cul-de-sac. I know how to do this thing. I'm not a professional, never was, never claimed to be, but I understand a little bit. And so this was a copperhead. Let's take that. Let's just quickly go through this aspect. A copperhead is one of the least dangerous of the venomous reptiles, okay? It is at best a painful bite. Stop. Don't freak out. I'm telling you, this is the truth. How many deaths have there been from copperheads? How many people do you know who have died of a copperhead bite? Okay, we're going to move on from copperhead in a minute, but there have been 6 people who have died since the Civil War. Let that sink in, from copperhead bites. A copperhead bite, this is going to sound crazy, it's like a bad bee sting or a wasp or a hornet sting. Yes, it hurts like hell. It's going to hurt probably a lot more than a wasp sting. But this commenter said, that could drive you into bankruptcy and death, and that's just ignorance. I'm not saying that to be hurtful. That's just ignorance, uneducated. 6 deaths, roughly, since the Civil War. How many people do you think have died from encephalitis from mosquito bite in the past 125 years? Or how many people do you think have died from a bee sting? A lot of people. Hundreds a year die from anaphylactic shock from bee and wasp and hornet stings. Okay, so let that sink in. Put that in perspective. Do we go and imprison all the beekeepers and burn their hives in our mad hysteria because we're uneducated? Because it's like the gun debate. And this is another debate for another time. I'm not putting a stake on a horse here. I'm just saying, when we approach these things, don't be hysterical. Okay, so then you get into this whole educational process, and I'm not saying you need to educate yourself about what venom is the worst, a juvenile rattler or timber rattler or western diamondback, all that. You don't need to educate yourself in all that. I will tell you this, before my time, my father in his performances, he performed live with these animals to the oohs and ahs of the crowd. He would slap alligator tongues 30 years, 40 years before Crocodile Hunter was born. He did all that shit on Highway 90 in rural Mississippi, and where you would see giant farms that said Snake Farm 10 miles ahead, and you would stop and watch this young man milk a rattlesnake or handle a cobra or wrestle an alligator. He did all that, and he was bitten 3 times. He was envenomated twice, I believe, by rattlesnakes, which are some of the worst, and once by a water moccasin, or vice versa. Each time his arm puffed up, they would give him fluids or whatnot, and he would recuperate. He would be feeling ill, and it sucked. Your arm balloons up, and you get better. Generally, you can die from these rattlesnake bites, etc. I'm not saying don't remove a threat. I just believe in balance. Also, it's worth remembering, as I like to say, we're not necessarily qualified to know what to worry about. And irony comes into play. We had a case locally in Wilmington where a young man owned a place called the Serpentarium, where he had on exhibit cages and cases with venomous and just different kinds of wild reptiles. He would go to far reaches of the world and travel into jungles and collect the most neurotoxic, most dangerous reptiles and bring them back and put them on display for tourists, right? How did he die? He died of a gunshot wound. His wife shot him. She was, I believe, clinically insane, and he was shot to death in his apartment above the Serpentarium. Very sad. I think Nate Bargatze did a comedy piece. That's not a funny situation, but he did a joke about the irony of all of that. So, yeah. I submit to you that we just worry too much about things we don't need to worry about. But that's what I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to stimulate these things, and I like to challenge myself to open my mind and not just be hysterical and just have that knee-jerk reaction to life in general. So what is it that you're approaching and you're dealing with today that you don't want to be hysterical about? Or perhaps you're the kind of person that is just conditioned to be hysterical, to approach things theatrically like that. My mother was much that way. She lived in a panic, and everything was so dramatic. Bless her heart. She was a wonderful little woman, but she had a penchant for drama. Do you? I got up one spring morning and took my dog for a walk, and I went out here, and these 2 fellas had these long machetes. They have a long handle on them, and the bottom of it is a machete. It's like a surveyor's machete, not just a handheld, but with a long stick and a blade at the end. And they were just walking around a big hedge, and I said, "Good morning." He said, "Good morning." They had that hysterical look that I just described in the beginning in their eyes. I said, "How's it going?" They said, "We're looking for a snake." And I said, "Oh, what'd you see?" And I had my dog, and they had greeted me initially. And so my dog was curious, and we moved a little closer, and they were like, "Hey," and they wanted to engage me and tell me about the snake. And then the guy saw my dog come to sniff him, and he was like, "Whoa, whoa." And he's like, I'm thinking, wow, these people are just panicky about everything. And I'm not insulting. I'm just saying that is a natural kind of human response, I guess, when you just allow yourself to be like that. So I sensed agitation. So I pulled my dog back, and I said, what kind of snake did you see? It's a black one. And I'm thinking, okay, this is an eastern black racer right away. I said, was it long and skinny? Yeah, maybe. I said, those are eastern black racers. They're very common around here, so you can kind of gauge. It's going to be a hog nose. The hog nose is generally not really black, and a water snake wouldn't probably have been in that kind of bush area where they were, not near water. There are different black snakes. A water moccasin wouldn't have been there. So I kind of assumed it was an eastern black racer. I said, well, those are pretty good to have around. They eat rodents and, oh, no, and right away, the women and children won't even come out if there's a snake around here. And I'm thinking, that's the fastest snake around here. They are so afraid of humans. They are so not aggressive. They're like, if they see a human, they're beautiful, gorgeous creatures, black and shiny. They look like glass, and the way they slither is just a thing to behold. But they had to kill that snake because of the women and children. And I'm thinking, that's always the way it is, isn't it? So, law of unintended consequences. Quickly, I'll tell you a story. My brother once told me, he said, he saw this same, you see it all the time. He said, these men were absolutely hysterical. He said, Jay, it was the funniest thing to watch. I'm approaching from a distance near a schoolyard on a Sunday or something. And they're jumping around, and they're lunging forward and jumping back, and they picked up a bike rack together, and they threw a bike rack, a big galvanized steel bike rack, and they threw it, and then they jumped back, and he said, I went over there, and I said, what's the problem, guys? And they said, snake! And he said, I looked down on the ground, and there's this beautiful little king snake. Have you ever seen a king snake? They're so docile. And they're gorgeous. They're markings. They've got these bands around them of a kind of a light yellowish color, and they're a black. And don't let me get carried away, but they're an interesting, cool-looking little snake. So harmless. They tiny little heads, and they eat other snakes. They eat copperheads. They literally will eat a venomous snake. And that's why they call them a king snake, because they're the king of snakes. They eat other snakes. My uncle, when I was 8 years old, he was terrified of snakes, and he said, Jason, come here. I was a little boy, and he brought me out into his long country gravel driveway by the woods. He said, look. And there was two king snakes. Guess what? One was eating the other, had ingested half of that snake. And I reached down, and I was like, wow, Uncle John, and I pulled, I shouldn't have done this, but I pulled one snake out of the other, and I had two pet snakes. I won the lottery that day. So, but my brother said, it's okay, guys, let me take care of it. And he picked the little king snake up and walked away, and the guys were like, man, that thing could bite you, man. So he said, I released the snake, because it's a harmless snake, in my yard. And then he said later, the power went out. I shouldn't admit this, but he said the king snake somehow circumnavigated the neighborhood and went up a power pole and got caught and found its way into a power line looking for a bird's nest. And yes, there are those unintended consequences, but that's a freaking one in a million. That's bizarre. That's like a bird or a monkey getting in a power line. Stuff happens. Anyway, let us not be hysterical. And I'm sorry, I know I've gone on forever, but it just fascinates me how we can just get conditioned and programmed into hysteria that we don't need. Why do we need the drama? Perhaps we need it. Perhaps we live for drama. That's what life's about. That's what makes it interesting. But I'm here to tell you, there's another way to look at it. Let nature be. Don't go out and destroy it. This is our theater. We're here to be custodians, not destroyers. What are we, the Shivas or Divas? I don't know. But just perhaps let it play out. Consume it and behold it. Be edified by it. But don't run out and drain bodies of water and cut down trees you don't need to cut down and kill animals you don't need to kill. Lest you have people come and just burn your neighborhood down and root you out, smoke you out, and kill you for no reason. Take what you need to take. Leave what you can, okay? Love the world. All right. Love you all. Share this parable, if you will. Be well.